Good morning. My name is Alex Whelan, and today I will give you a brief introduction to sensitivity analyses. We will begin by defining sensitivity analysis, discussing the qualitative steps involved, and outlining quantitative steps in performing an analysis. We will conduct an example analysis while we proceed. Finally, we will touch on capital budgeting and define the types of project risk and how to incorporate them into a capital budgeting analysis. Before we begin, I believe it is helpful to define a sensitivity analysis. Vipond 2022 states, sensitivity analysis is a tool used in financial modeling to analyze how the different values of a set of independent variables affect a specific dependent variable under certain specific conditions. To begin a sensitivity analysis, you need to select a testable variable. The variable that will be tested, that variable will be tested and the results will be documented. The process can then be repeated until all variables have been tested. Next, the data will need to be logged. Repeat steps 2 and 3 until you have tested every variable. One analogy of a sensitivity analysis is to the scientific method. It is a process for testing variables and their results on a measurable outcome. In the example analysis, the tested variable is units sold. Last quarter, the company sold 9,000 units. Company leadership wants to test how changes in units sold affect the company's gross and net income. The tested amount will range from 3,000 to 21,000 units in intervals of 3,000. Before the analysis can be run, you will need to collect the remaining data, which includes profit and loss items. For example, fixed cost, sales cost of each unit, and production costs. Now that the question has been asked and the data collected, you can begin performing the analysis. The process begins with a blank workbook in Excel. Document your inputs and outputs determined in the previous steps. Ensure you use formulas to feed your profit and loss or output numbers, or this will not work. Again, make sure formulas feed your profit and loss numbers, or this will not work. Constants should be placed in the same row as the tested variable. Highlight all cells in the analysis portion created in the last step. Select the Data tab, and then select Forecast. Finally, select What If Analysis, and select the column Input cell. In the case of our example, the input cell will be the number of units sold. After executing the previous step, you should have a data set that answers the question posed. To reiterate, our question was, what would happen to net income and gross income if the units sold changed? The tested range was from 3,000 to 21,000 units in intervals of 3,000. As you can see from the example analysis above, the question has been answered and can then be forwarded to management to aid in the decision-making process. Switching gears, capital budgeting is the process of determining which projects to pursue in a company. Risk must be included in the analysis to help select the best course of action. The different types of risk include standalone, contribution to firm risk, and systematic risk. Standalone risk refers to a project's potential without considering how it impacts other assets and projects. Contribution to firm risk attempts to define the effects of the project on other projects. Systematic risk considers how the project appears from a stakeholder's perspective. Risk can be incorporated into the capital budgeting process in several ways, including risk premiums, payback periods, and certainty equivalence. A risk premium is the return of an asset over a risk-free one, for example, treasury bonds. This method is used to compensate investors for investing in riskier projects. Projects that require too much risk premium can become unprofitable and therefore non-viable. Investors expect to receive their money back promptly. Each project is assessed by when they will be able to pay back investors, and those that fall outside the appropriate time frame are deemed too risky. According to Adams, a certainty equivalent coefficient is a factor that determines the risk associated with future cash flows. Future project cash flows are estimated with probability and statistics. To get a better estimate of whether these cash flows will materialize, the certainty equivalent coefficient is used. Projects with unlikely cash flows can be deemed too risky. In conclusion, today we defined a sensitivity analysis and discussed the steps involved in creating one. We defined capital budgeting. Finally, we discussed the 3 types of risk and how to incorporate risk in the capital budgeting process. Any questions can be directed to me following the completion of this presentation.